And to discuss this crucial topic, we have a lineup of industry experts and leaders who will be coming right here on the stage. Join me in welcoming with a huge round of applause our panelists. Our first panelist is Mr. Raghuram Talluri, co-founder and chief executive officer, Loadshare. Request him to please come on the stage. The claps must go on. Come on, everybody. Mr. Gautam Kapoor, chief operating officer, co-founder, Ship Rocket. Welcome. We also have Mr. Suraj Saharan, co-founder, Delivery. Please join us. Thank you. Last but not the least, Mr. Abhishek Bansal, co-founder and CEO, Shadowfax, to please join us. And a moderator from McKinsey & Company. Over to you. Mic is on.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hello,
Thank you.
hello.
Thank you very much. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nilesh Mundra. I lead our Asian logistics practice for McKinsey & Company, a senior partner based in Mumbai. And I'm glad to have this august panel with me today to discuss probably one of the most interesting topics of what's going to happen when ONDC really becomes big, which is how is it going to impact logistics and how is logistics going to enable ONDC? I think, but before we get started on discussing both sides of this equation, I would love to just hear from the panelists on, they've been experimenting with ONDC for a bit. Some of you have had direct experience on the protocol and seeing what it can do. Would love to just get a sense on what have you all seen? What has been your experience so far? Raghu, maybe we start with you here.
So thanks, Nilesh. Glad to be here. And we were the first to go online with ONDC when it started. So we are very, very high belief on the whole opportunity. And I think somebody described it in the previous panel as it's a movement. I think it's a very good articulation. It's not about whether it's a deplatformizing, it's a protocol. It's just a movement that is starting off. And I see this as a huge demand side boost that can happen. Many new use cases will come out from there. And I also interestingly, so for example, right, you will have the neighborhood retail guy who was doing 5-10 orders. He will start seeing orders in hundreds because earlier he was just interacting with customers on a one-on-one basis and he had his chotu hood go and run. Now he will get a lot more of customer demand coming in and he will start kind of, employ logistics service providers who can do it for him. So I think there's a bunch of use cases over there. I also see a very interesting set of new use cases coming in from, models like Namma Yatri, if you guys have heard of it. In Bangalore, they're clocking 25,000 rides. It's on the back of the ONDC protocol. Logistics service providers have a play to get into that. We think that can lead to new sets of like bike taxi players who can come in by leveraging their fleet. So, but I think these are all interesting possibilities. We are at a very early stage. I do think that things are just about starting and early signs are, in terms of just sparking up imagination is extremely high. A lot of things to be kind of sorted out on the customer experience front, but I think very, very bullish and very optimistic and early signs have been from where it was 6 months back and where the momentum is now. I think it's real, right? So quite excited about it.
Thanks, Raghu. Gautam, maybe over to you. Firstly, a happy birthday. Thanks for joining us on this panel and to put you on the spot. Shiprocket's obviously been also toying with ONDC and what all it can do to unlock capabilities. How has it been so far?
Thanks a lot, by the way. I think ONDC, in some way, it was a vision that we always had when we were building Shiprocket. How do you democratize the whole demand? You could not, actually, but you could do a whole lot of bit when the demand first reaches the customer to all the way from supply and giving the experience of how a large marketplace gives it today. So when you think about it, it's something which we've always believed in, and I think the government doing it after having UPI being a large success, ULIP is going to be a large success, we all know that, and ONDC on the same lines being democratized and open, and one more thing changing in the country is there is a real Bharat 2.0, right? We know all of that. So I think ONDC has come in at the right time. The protocol by itself is pretty robust. I think the only challenge what I think others are also thinking about is the flywheel has to work, right? And we know eventually it does. The demand and supply has to come in and meet each other. But once the flywheel starts working and there is control which the systems brings in, this should work, right? It is also not just the protocol for logistics. It is a lot of things which are not existent when you think about the commerce world. You don't have rated goods. You don't have products which have a rating, which you don't have a seller rating outside a large marketplace which is controlled by them. So those things opening up. Similarly for also logistics, I think being able to compare one to another and then use the one which is best for that particular lane is, think about it, right? It's largely what large marketplace intends to do, but closed, but are now open.
Thanks for that, Gautam. I think I've bookmarked a couple of words you said, right, about the flywheel having to work now, the point around Bharat 2.0 and how it's becoming real. And I think in the logistics industry in particular, we've seen this truly revolutionize over the last decade. Suraj, maybe over to you, your perspective on this.
So I volunteered with the UID when Aadhaar project had kicked off in 2010 for about 6 months. And I think the government has got this model right, where they create a small subsidiary or a different company which consists of people coming in from corporate backgrounds and try to solve a problem that is in front of the country, right? So in that sense, ONDC is the right team working on this. Early signs are positive. I think the pace at which the work is happening on the ONDC side is a welcome change, because otherwise when you typically work with government departments, everything takes a lot longer. And so I think the whole idea anyways had to see light of day, and this is the right team and the right time for this to be getting created. The logistics players are mature, the buyers are comfortable with e-commerce, and so I do feel that it's just a matter of time before this becomes very, very large.
Thanks, Suraj. I think you put on an important point around the speed by which we've seen this develop has been fascinating. Yeah, Abhishek, your experience with this?
I think Shadowfax, we got integrated on ONDC a couple of months back, and we have been piloting across a bunch of initiatives on last mile, be it grocery delivery, be it food delivery, or be it like intercity delivery. But again, adding on to what Suraj said, I think one thing that has completely blown us away in the way things are happening is the agility and the way technology is being created. Typically, you would associate government initiative where probably agility is not always there. Okay, the technology innovation might be outsourced, but over here you come, I mean, you'll just be amazed by the amount of technology is getting created, how fast it is getting created, and I can tell you a real life experience. I think it is faster to integrate with ONDC today than probably with some of the new age companies in the market. So I think that is something which has completely blown us away. I think the numbers have started to kick in. We are seeing some early goodness in pockets. And as we earlier heard, it's a flywheel, it's a network effect. Okay, if there is one success that we will see in commerce, trust me, it will blow things in a very, very different manner versus what it is happening today in the country.
Thanks, Abhishek. It was interesting to say faster to integrate with ONDC than it is with other companies at times. Fabulous. I'm going to come back, Gautam, to your point around UPI, ULIP, now ONDC. Digitization in logistics has been always a hot topic in India. It's been something that we believe is going to unlock efficiencies. It's something that India has been yearning for. How do you see this now in the next decade? What do you see digital logistics look like? And how do you see this improving efficiencies?
So I think from where Shiprocket sits, right, and when I look at digitization, in the last six or 7 years, working with partners like Delivery, Shadowfax, a whole lot amount of digitization from a commerce, logistics, small parcel business, that is area that I would like to pick on. has happened over a lot of period of time, right? E-commerce business is riddled with certain issues around trust, cash and delivery, returns, and then partners have been able to bring products and digitize those products to an extent, from the payment on deliveries or having a return experience which is seamless. Now, when you think about the future of digitalization, the challenge today is that most of the work that has happened on the logistics, making that digital, it is still not married back to where the order is actually being processed from. Now, is the inventory, because all this is being done to give a certain experience to the consumer. Even though this part is largely 99% efficient and you can basically assume that it's going to work, the back end of it, is the inventory there or not, is being packed at the right time, is it being picked up at the right time, is it packed properly, etc. And all of those problems are actually can be solved digitally, all the way from demand to actually giving a great return experience to the consumer. So all those things are actually digital problems, and I think ONDC will essentially play a large role in making sure they show up to a consumer when they're buying it. And I'm sure as companies like us have to be responsible to be able to make sure products behind them are built so that you can cater to an experience to the consumer.
Thanks for that, Gautam. I think it's important that you said that there are issues around trust, and we will come back to this around how do we unlock that. Maybe to you, Suraj, delivery has obviously been at the forefront of digitization from day get-go. How have you seen this evolve with these initiatives by the government, and how have they actually helped enable delivery further?
So, logistics traditionally has been an industry where tech penetration was very low when we started, right? And I think what has helped us grow this fast is actually the fact that we use technology as the center point of our solution. We've digitized the supply chain. Now, what is remaining is being able to digitize inventory. So, in earlier sessions also we spoke about the fact that wherever the supply is available, the connect from there to demand is digitally trackable and visible, but there may be supply available today closer than where you're getting it from, but that's not digitally known yet. I think that's where somebody like an ONDC comes in, where if you start to digitize inventory availability of small retailers, the actual distance traveled by the product to reach the buyer can be reduced. And I think that's the one piece that is missing today. And I think ONDC has the ability and has the vision to try and solve that bit of the digitization part.
Well, that's interesting you say that, Suraj. It's almost like the gap is between when bytes become atoms and the physical movement has to ensure that it's the most efficient based on what the digital solution is giving. Coming to this point around trust, Abhishek, and I know this is something that you've been passionately discussing and debating. There is this concept about we moving from a digital economy now, even needing a reputation economy. There needs to be a rating. There needs to be a way of trust that can be established digitally. What's your experience been on this?
See, India, from I think whatever we have learned, at least in the last 5 years, it's not an easy country to operate in. Okay, probably 99% of your customers, sellers, delivery boys will be doing the right thing. There'll be 1% of those people who will actually destroy at least 20% of the value in the entire supply chain. We have seen frauds happening across the board in very structured manner, and I believe everyone over here at some level would have solved for frauds across the last decade. Okay, if you want to solve for supply chain logistics in this country, you will have to solve for frauds. If you look at some of the largest platforms today in the country, they have actually solved for fraud. They have like massive teams who are just trying to figure out patterns where there is theft happening, where there are frauds happening. As a customer, I still cannot have infinite trust on a platform because there is still a possibility that a fake product might be at my doorstep. There is still that segment of customers who are still not shopping online because they don't trust whether they'll get the right product or not. even today, if I have to buy an iPhone, I'll probably walk into a store or probably go to an Apple store and buy that rather than buying from some of the known platforms out there, because there is that element of trust that is still missing in. And trust me, if you look at a very micro level in specific pockets of the country, it is a huge problem today. Okay, there is a significant amount of time that all of us actually spend in trying to solve for frauds. My view over here is that there is so much more that can be done by a centralized repository like an ONDC, where there is a very structured protocol and there can be very structured SOPs onto how to resolve that fraud. There can be a factor around trust. There can be a factor around, as you say, reputation. And there is so much to solve for just around this space. And trust me, this can really unlock a lot of value the way commerce happens. It can actually create a lot of value for 99% of the other entities, be it a seller, be it a delivery partner, because that 1% loss is actually taken eventually by everyone. It gets built into everybody's margins. I think one more thing around it is the fact that as these platforms are getting built, I think what we have seen in the protocols today is the fact that we have basically been able to build a protocol where we call internally, we use a terminology called, we call it a happy flow. Okay, everything is happy, so this is how it is going to happen. But I think the amount of exceptions that happen in this country, okay, I think some of those things eventually will get built over ONDC, but I think that is something which is going to make the platform super scalable. And how do you enable trust through some of those protocols is something which is going to basically create a winning factor.
Interesting. I think let's dive a little bit deeper into this trust problem. Raghu, you've created an entire network in Loadshare based on an asset-light model. How have you dealt with this trust equation even amongst different third-party partners of yours?
Yeah, so I think you solve for trust primarily by using technology. I think there's no at scale, the only way you can do it, and then you have to also solve for trust by saying that, look, I will put aside a certain part of whatever my margins are, dedicated to just kind of writing it off, because there'll be some cases that happen. Over time, you reduce it by, using your data science, your models, your onboarding process. So I think let's take an example, right? If you take food, for example, there are delivery boys, maybe that 0.2% maybe, who are actually kind of not delivering it right to the customer's doorstep, whatever they're doing with it. Do you have a governance engine that basically tracks this and makes sure that you don't let these guys come on board and come onto the platform again? Right? You can't do this manually. It is a technology process. In the meanwhile, you also figure out there might be some genuine issue that the 10% of those guys actually face. How do you prevent them from getting debarred onto the platform, right? So there are things that you have to solve for. Again, so technology has to come to the forefront to be able to solve this. That said, I think the other part of it, which is also equally important, is what kind of incentives and disincentives you're putting on. For how do you reward this, or how do you reward good behavior? And that builds in a virtuous cycle that the good guys actually keep coming in and the bad guys get weeded out. That's one example. I think food is still easier. I would say on the e-commerce side, it gets a lot more tricky. Value of the shipments are much higher. There are too many kind of moving parts. There are too many stakeholders. Who's done the fraud? Is it the seller who's done it? Is it the customer? Is it the delivery boy? It's just very hard to solve it. I think it's over time that you realize that these are specific pockets and this is specific things, but there's a price to pay, which is what I meant in terms of saying you have to go through the cycle and then you learn certain things. You make sure that you correct that one part of it and iterate again, right? So it's not an easy problem to solve, but it just takes time. I think the idea of having like a CIBIL score for each of the participants and that acting like a reputation score, CIBIL score, whatever you call it, I think that's a critical element that's, I think, the trust and safety team at ONDC is putting together. And like I agree with Abhishek, if you solve for that, if somebody central at a government body level kind of puts that framework in place, I think it just benefits the industry at large.
No, thanks for that. I like the idea of a CIBIL score for logistics almost for every individual. Gautam, you've also dealt with this trust thing, I'm sure, in the millions of parcels that go through your platform. Any thoughts from your side on how ONDC can better this system?
I think I'll try and take a different view on it's a different element of trust, which is the consumer trusting the seller to be able to get the goods. That trust there's a large trust deficit there, right? Okay, I am ordering a shirt, I'll get a shirt. Because most of the purchases are happening by looking at an ad on a social media platform. You maybe liking the marketing ad, landing on a product, reading the product description, liking the price, checking out, purchasing it on a cash on delivery transaction which you've not paid for. You'll pay only when the goods are coming to you. The trust deficit there is largely multifold, right? Will the goods ever come to me? I should pay on COD, that is why. And then there is several 5 or 6 workflows which will come into action if it's a COD order, and then there's a large cost for the seller in this case who will lose money on that COD order because the transaction will be much more expensive, there's a high chance of return, and the material has to come back, so he's losing money there as well. So it's a loss for the seller in most cases. From a consumer perspective, he does not know if the return experience will be proper or not. So when you think about this trust deficit between a seller and a buyer, and think about how ONDC will eventually solve this. Voila, that is really what you are trying to solve. One reason again is if I should buy from here or I should go to a standardized marketplace which will give me a standard return policy. Most of the sellers on D2C do not have a clear return policy. So they eventually customers will change their mind, not take the product, or even if they take the product, the percentage is smaller. So it's making it too expensive for the brand to be successful or the seller to be successful.
Well, interesting you say that, Gautam. I think maybe what we'll also do is twist the discussion. So we've discussed a little bit about digitization and logistics and what's potentially the struggles that we're facing. But logistics is also a key enabler for ONDC's success. Frankly, without companies such as yours, ONDC is not going to be able to deliver the products to the customers, especially when it's a democratized system. Would love to hear from you your experience on that side, being a service provider on ONDC. How has it been, and what are the learnings, if any, on how that can be scaled up? Maybe Abhishek, we start with you.
I think this is still early days. We are also trying to figure out how best to iron out some of these issues and what are the key enablers for some of these things to happen. I think one thing is very clear to us is that this entire concept of unbundling, we are a big believer of unbundling. I think in this country, if you really have to unlock the power of logistics, if you have to gain the right efficiency, there have to be some regulatory interventions to ensure that basically platforms that scale operate in an unbundled manner. Okay, if you look at China has multiple logistics companies and fairly large logistics companies, and there is a reason for that because that market at least an 80% level today operates on a completely unbundled level. Okay, where typically sellers have the power to choose which logistics player to work with. Okay, one of the things in India which requires some bit of attention is how do you make it more systemized? How do you make it more, maybe bring in some sort of an intervention from a regulatory standpoint so that logistics companies can basically scale to a certain level. And it's again a very simple flywheel. I mean, the more the scale, the better is the cost you can provide, the more data you have, the better is the experience that you can eventually provide. So I think it's a very straightforward sort of flywheel that we've seen operate in some of the other countries. You look at probably markets like US, where again, there are fairly large logistics platforms who operate in an unbundled manner. So I think in India, this was not happening, but with ONDC, there's a huge opportunity that if a significant portion of the GMV of the market actually starts moving in an unbundled manner, this can really stabilize all of our networks, and that benefit can be actually provided back to the sellers, which today maybe just be concentrated in a few hands.
Interesting, Abhishek, that you mentioned this flywheel again. Let's maybe dive into that in a minute, because this flywheel point is really the core of scalability for the platform as well, that we are also doing with ONDC. I think coming to you, Suraj, this point around being a service provider on ONDC, right, and ensuring ONDC's success is also dependent a lot on the success of the logistics companies. How has the experience been on that?
So I think See, the experience so far, not too many orders have been placed on ONDC, at least because we're in the intercity part of the movement. So we've seen total of about 100 orders so far. I think the trust part is the part that needs to be solved for this to really scale up. And, you know, we were talking about it, but one of the points that I wanted to add to that is that, see, you cannot have a situation where there will be no frauds. I think let's just agree that that is not going to happen ever. But what needs to happen is that any time there is a fraud that happens, the redressal has to be very, very quick. Redressal in terms of penalties, redressal in terms of correcting the experience for whoever suffered there has to be fast, because if that does not happen, people will start to lose trust in the platform itself. And I think this grievance redressal system, the faster it is, the easier it becomes for you to identify who exactly did that fraud. Because there are so many participants, right from the seller. We've seen sellers sending out fake products, sellers sending out wrong products. We've seen people who've gone out to pick up do frauds. We've seen frauds happen by people who are going to deliver. We've seen customers doing fraud where they've ordered something, the right thing has come, they've just taken it out, replaced it and said, I got something wrong. Right? So I think acting on it fast enough will build that trust. You solve for the issue, whoever. So if the customer has suffered, make right on the part of the customer and penalize the wrongdoer in this case. Right? That's when you will start to see this volume go up quite a lot. And look, I mean, for us, a shipment coming through NDC is just like any other shipment coming to our network, right? So for us, for a logistics player, it doesn't matter where it's coming from or who is the originator of that shipment, as long as it's a shipment that's packed correctly, has the right label. If those are fulfilled, I think we obviously will benefit out of more volume flowing into the e-commerce industry through NDC, and we will also be able to provide a certain standard quality of service as long as the basic packing requirements are met. So those are my opinions.
Interesting. You're right. Finally, a packet is a packet. As long as the label is correct, it doesn't make a difference which protocol it's following. Raghu, I'm going to twist into a different part of the discussion. We also wanted to touch upon multimodal logistics. And India, with its large coastline, with its significantly dense railway network, still struggles with multimodal in a big way. We just heard about how ULIP is trying to get all the data accessed onto the platform. What is your sense on multimodal? What is stopping, and can ONDC really provide a solution even to help multimodal?
I'll put a disclaimer on this. I don't think we've explored multimodal enough, right? But there was a time, I remember, we tried to do something with the railways, both on the e-commerce side of it, to use railways as a means for like long haul, as well as to do it for the B2B segment, the non-e-commerce side of it, right? And I just think we gave up very quickly because we just felt it is impossible to deal with them. There's no systems in place, right? There is no protocols or no APIs, nothing that helps us kind of work with them in a streamlined enough manner for us to even take the discussion forward, right? So I will say the potential of this, just from the cost of, transportation of large bulk goods on waterways, as well as like rail, is obviously, I think, interesting to consider. Perhaps not for e-commerce, but I think beyond e-commerce, there's a significant part of trade that is beyond e-commerce. I think there's a massive opportunity over there. But I think from whatever I understood of ULIP so far, I think it's super promising. I think my eyes just lit up at the digitization that's happening and the fact that people are thinking of integrating all of these systems together to reduce overall system cost. So quite excited, love to learn more actually about how this is going to play out.
Suraj, what's your experience been? I know that multimodal is again something Delhivery is obviously looking at on a pan-India basis.
So I think we've again experimented with railways in the early days. Pilferage was a big issue, and lack of information about where the parcel exactly is was an issue. I think those are being solved now as we speak. We are also experimenting with things like it's called roll on, roll off, where the truck actually moves onto a rake and gets transported, and then you take it off at the destination and move forward. I think ONDC per se doesn't have a role to play here, but with everything happening around the new logistics policy and the unified platform, this will become a lot more efficient and possible very soon. That's the hope. And given the record of other things like Aadhaar and the UPI and now ONDC, I think the government, now that they have decided they're going to solve for this, I don't see it's going to be a problem for too long. It should become a reality very soon.
Got it. Interesting. Maybe just a couple of questions to wrap us up. One is around the art of possible. As you all see, as what you all have heard today, what you all have seen and experienced with the ONDC, what are some of the radical ideas that you think it can unlock for logistics? Raghu, maybe we start with you.
I'll just start from one very simple example. Right now, if you look at the delivery boy, he's by and large bound to one, maybe two apps that he can work. Beyond that, he doesn't have the cognitive ability to process. But can he actually do work for a big basket as well as a Flipkart or a Meesho or a Swiggy or a Zomato? The answer is yes, right? Does he do across all of them so that he maximizes earnings? Answer is no. Why? Because it's just very, very difficult to kind of have a unified interface that he can deal with. I think one of the very interesting possibilities, even a bike taxi, add a bike taxi also to the mix, right? I think one of the interesting possibilities I see is, which we are personally kind of very excited about, we are trying to shape it, is can we have one unified face? Think supply first, right? Delivery boy has one app, everybody pushes in orders, he chooses, not a marketplace or a platform, even like us chooses what to give him. He chooses what is best for him. And it is one interface that kind of helps him keep a track of whatever is done, manages orders, and therefore increases earnings possibility and completely de-platformize, right? Which is exactly what an ONDC enables. I think that technology guardrails are being laid out by ONDC. This is a very interesting possibility.
Interesting. Democratizing the delivery boy's earning potential itself. Gautam, any thoughts?
I think there are two things that would come to my mind. One is there's a supply app, there's a demand app, there's a logistics provider in this transaction largely. I think when ONDC goes more backwards, that is inventory, knowing the inventory, beyond that actually promising something to a customer and then owning some parts of the communication, because which is beyond the logistics. Because today what will happen is that an order gets dispatched, but the experience is not the same what you get from a large marketplace. Now, that means not just logistics, it means a whole lot of things backwards. If it's able to do that successfully, I think that's largely valuable. Also, the second thing is that the true democratization of the platform and being valuable to the extent that it is designed to be. The inventory is today available across the country. It is closer to you. Everything is largely available closer to the customer. The challenge is that the supply and the demand in a smaller radius does not marry with each other because there's no platform to do so. And eventually, when all the supply comes in, all the demand comes in, you don't have to bring goods from a different region or a city far away, which is happening today. If you look at a large marketplace, a lot of transactions are happening, and they're basically doing this through having a network of fulfillment centers across the country, making sure the inventory is there. But in the true sense, the inventory is actually there in a store, right? Either through a distributor or a dealer or a store. Now, how do you get that to the customer? Have the inventory there, have the visibility. I think that's really radical when you think about it. I think it doesn't exist anywhere in the world to that extent.
I think it's almost like how do you get to the true omni-channel potential of India, right? Ensuring as limited distance traveled between the demand and supply as possible.
And when you think about India, right, how our supply of the goods, and how any other developed economy, supply of goods exists is very, very different. We have kiranas with a large inventory pool. a wider inventory pool. We have more shops in a local area than anywhere in the world. So that is very different. The supply chain by itself is largely very different.
Suraj, any thoughts from your side?
So I think this is the point that I had raised early on as well. Digitizing the local inventory. I think that is going to be the biggest game changer, because today the incentive for a small shop to digitize inventory is very little. They know they will never be a successful seller on a large platform, because large platforms operate very differently. They have sort of vested interest, right? But if you have a completely democratic platform like ONDC, I think they will realize that digitizing their inventory will actually get them more business. And so that for me is the biggest sort of opportunity here. And ONDC is the right partner to solve for it.
Abhishek, last words?
So I think I'm not looking for anything more radical than actually implementation of this ONDC in itself, because this is the most radical thing that has happened to Indian e-commerce probably in the last 5 to 8 years. I think one very interesting point that at least we have picked up since our interactions in the morning and looking at how this will eventually happen is that essentially the interaction of logistics with the core platform is going to promote fair market practice. Now, as simple as that might sound, it is something which does not exist in India today. How to price your product, how to price your offering in a fair market. In a fair market, you are being judged by your quality, by your pricing, by your reach maybe, but you're not being judged by anything else. It's not by any kind of a contract foundation that you have with any seller or any platform. And typically, when you price a certain product in our kind of a market, you tend to link it either through a certain volume or you try to link it to something else. But it's not fair market practice. It's not like every customer will have the same pricing out there. I think it'll require all of us to rethink the way we think about pricing and how to operate in a fair market practice. And that's probably, I think, something for all of us to take back and understand and figure out a solution to it.
Well, thanks for that. I think it's been an engaging panel. Thank you so much, folks. I think from discussing how logistics can be an enabler to scaling ONDC to seeing how logistics can benefit from the protocol itself. I think it summarized very well. It's a movement and not a protocol. And hopefully this truly transforms the way we do commerce in the country going forward. Thank you very much for your time, panelists. Thank you.
I think the clap should be more. Come on, people. We are less in number, but definitely not less in energy. On this note, I would request our moderator to please felicitate our distinguished panelists right here. Thank you.